Time now for the Week 5 Over-Under Challenge. As always, this segment is presented by DraftKings. And as always, I'm joined by Colin Cowherd to talk through some of our favorite player picks for this week's slate. Second straight week, I've got to give a shout out to my colleague and Fantasy Pros analyst, Andrew Erickson, still number one atop the leaderboard. A 30-8 record on his picks this season. He is absolutely crushing it. Colin and I will continue to try to do our best to keep up with Erickson. As a reminder, everyone listening can play along with our over-under challenge and try to not only beat Colin, but win some cool prizes by heading to fantasypros.com/challenge. All right, let's start as always with the quarterbacks. Jaden Daniels going up against the Browns. Debro was on your show, Colin, in August, my other colleague at Fantasy Pros. He was all over Jaden Daniels. He is looking really good for that prediction now. He was all over him for Offensive Rookie of the Year. He was all over him as a fantasy quarterback. He is number one on DraftKings, 23.7 fantasy points per game this season. Like I mentioned, now facing that Browns defense, they are only allowing a 58.7% completion percentage against. What do you expect out of Daniels this week?
Well, Myles Garrett's banged up, and the Browns' offensive line is still a mess, so Jaden Daniels is going to get some possessions. I'm not so sure if Deshaun Watson isn't just washed. Nick Chubb comes back, that's good. But until I see otherwise, I think Jaden Daniels is going to be effective. I do think there'll be regression at some point. I was shocked how they blew out Arizona. I'm going to ride Jaden Daniels again until I see otherwise.
On that point, like I mentioned that Debro had kind of talked about with you about that Offensive Rookie of the Year, just Daniels in general, how impressed are you so far in this first month? I know you mentioned regression likely coming at some point, but I mean, he certainly is the favorite right now.
Yeah, and I'm also surprised by their run game. We didn't look at this as an elite offensive line, but it absolutely has been. And you're seeing 3 and 4 and 5 yards gained by running backs for Washington before contact. So that's impressive.
The other quarterback I wanted to hit on this week, Jordan Love, going up against the Rams. It took a little bit for him to get going against Minnesota. Obviously, they're a good defense, and obviously coming back from the knee injury, he ended up having a huge fantasy day, QB2 on the week on DraftKings. 389 passing yards, 4 touchdowns. Did have the 3 interceptions, like I mentioned. Kind of a slow start there. Going up against the Rams defense that is gettable. What do you think about Love this week?
Well, it's one of these things. What do I believe? In the second half against Minnesota, I thought they looked really, really strong. Now, Christian Watson's hurt. Some of their young receivers haven't played up to snuff. I think the Rams defense is talented, but super young. The last couple of years, they've spent their draft capital top of the board on a lot of defensive players. So the wise guys like the Rams this week, I think it's fairly high scoring. I think Jordan Love will play well. I don't think he'll have a great afternoon. It will be a home game for the Packers, even though it's at SoFi Stadium, probably a 65-35 Packer split. I think Jordan Love will be fine, but I don't think he'll be exceptional. I think it's going to be a fairly low-scoring, competitive game in the 26-23 area. Both teams doing okay. I think the Rams defense is better than people think. I think the Rams, has simply struggled with injuries and red zone scoring. So I think Jordan Love will be fine, but I don't think the receiving core has grown like I thought it would so far.
Let's go to the other side of this game as we move to the running backs. Kyren Williams, obviously going up against the Packers. RB4 on DraftKings this season, 17.4 fantasy points per game. Obviously gets a lot of volume, got some home run potential. He was tied for RB1 in week 3 with Saquon during that week. What do you make out of what we've seen from him this season so far, and what do you expect out of him against the Packers?
Well, I know McVay loves him. I think he's a really unique special talent. And with no Puka or Cooper Kupp, and for that matter, Tyler Higbee, the tight end who hasn't played yet this year, I think they're going to be more Kyren Williams reliant. Blake Corum is talented, but he's a rookie. So I think the most talented player outside of Stafford on this team is Williams. And I think he's going to eat a little bit against Green Bay. I think the Rams will probably play pretty well in the spot.
Let's move to a few wide receivers here. Amari Cooper going up against the Commanders. We've talked on these segments already this season, Colin, about how this defense is one you want to attack through the air. Amari Cooper has been very boom or bust so far this season. He had over 20 fantasy points one week, a few other busts in there. Do you think he'll have a boom week against the Commanders?
I don't. He's almost felt disengaged this year. It's as if he and Watson aren't particularly close. Again, the Browns have major offensive line issues. So I'm not going to put any big money on Cleveland receivers at this point. I'll say it again. I'm not so sure the Browns aren't trapped with a washed quarterback in Deshaun Watson. If Kevin Stefanski, an excellent coach, can't elevate him past his current playing level, I'm not sure there's much left for Watson.
Yeah, you always talk about, the unstoppable force against the immovable object. The Browns passing game against the Commanders pass defense is the opposite. It's the stoppable force against the very movable object. Another receiver I want to hit on here is Zay Flowers going up against the Bengals. Wide receiver 46 this season, just 23.5 fantasy points on the year. And a lot of those came in a week 2 loss to the Raiders. He hasn't been amazing against the Bengals in the past, and they've just been so good running the ball. And why go away from Derrick Henry when it's worked so well the last couple of weeks? Do you think that we're going to see that again against Cincinnati out of the Ravens?
Yeah, it's almost as if we anointed Zay Flowers as a 1, and he's really probably a 2. He is a small receiver. As you know, increasingly they have more weapons. I think Derrick Henry has shifted the focus off Zay Flowers. I think this is a divisional game. He's never played great against the Bengals. I don't think Zay Flowers has a big afternoon.
Last receiver here, Jackson Smith-Njigba going up against the Giants. Wide receiver 50 this season. Pretty similar to Zay Flowers in that a lot of his fantasy points came in just 1 week. Also week 2 for him in that game against the Patriots. Somebody who's really talented. I mean, I loved him coming out as a prospect in dynasty leagues and as a rookie in fantasy leagues. And it's starting to feel more and more like maybe JSN is just a really good possession receiver. I'm not ready to entirely write him off. But yeah, what do you think about him in this matchup?
Well, I like the Seahawks in this game. I was very impressed, despite the fact they lost to the Lions. They had 38 first downs. Clearly, Geno Smith and DK Metcalf have a very strong bond. The over-the-shoulder throws, the back shoulder throws, the timing routes. I think Lockett and DK Metcalf are the favorite sons of Geno Smith. And I, like you, feel like he's more possession than superstar. I like the Seahawks to win by about 10 points, but in this spot, I think DK Metcalf and Geno, and I'll say this, Walker in that run game, I think that's where the focus is for defensive coach Mike McDonald.
Thanks again for hopping on, Colin. Remember, everybody, to head to fantasypros.com/challenge to play along all season long.